Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to World of Warships with Koala. Firstly, I need to apologise for this video not being out yesterday, but it was my mum's birthday and we sat down and watched the Wimbledon final together, which went on much longer than expected, 5 hours. And these lads, Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic, they're old for world-class tennis players. Both of them are well past the usual retirement age, and they're the two best players in the world. It really was quite good to see. Anyway, on with the video. Now, in today's World of Warships video, I want to revisit carriers, because Wargaming is yet again attempting to rework carriers in order to fit them more seamlessly and less annoyingly into a game that's probably not the right sort of game to house them. Now, the work that's being done is far less significant than the overhaul to gameplay that was done, I believe, midway through last year, when we stopped having our top-down RTS carrier gameplay and started instead playing a navalised World of Warplanes. Actually, the changes aren't really being done to carriers at all. What's happening is that other ships are becoming more capable of, well, shooting down aircraft before they get rocketed, bombed and torpedoed to death. Now, I'm sure most of you know specifically what the changes are, but for those of you who don't, let's go through them quickly. Rather than the air defense guns of ships targeting a squadron of aircraft as a whole and spreading the damage done by flak across the attacking squadron evenly, they'll now pick an aircraft, focus him down until the poor pilot dies of lead poisoning, and then move on to the next aircraft. There are also other changes like improving the AA sector reinforcement mechanic and changing the matchmaker so that it prioritises games with less carriers, so you're far more likely to get a single carrier game than you are a double or even triple carrier game. Now, these changes are very good, don't get me wrong. I personally don't mind carriers themselves, despite the fact that I poke a lot of shit at them, but having 6 of them in one match is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there can be games that literally have 3 times as many carriers as destroyers, so good luck anybody being stealthy. So having less in a match is going to be a good thing. Likewise, the fact that you'll almost immediately kill aircraft when you flip on the anti-aircraft guns will actually make it seem like you're doing something to lessen the punishment you're about to take, rather than still taking all of it while every aircraft in the attacking squadron sponges up your flak, only to kill them all just a second after they drop their payloads, when it's a wee bit too late. So yes, I do like these changes, but I can't help feeling like Wargaming's kind of missing the point, and really missing out on a good opportunity to balance carriers and make them much more acceptable to players who may currently not like them being in the game at all. So we're going to discuss today what I believe is the main issue with carriers, and a couple of what I believe are great solutions to these problems. Now, Koala, you might be saying, if you want to talk about carriers and improvements to carrier gameplay, then why are you sailing out a mid-tier Japanese destroyer? I mean, there aren't even any carriers in this game. Well, no, you're right. This was a good game. I think it was my first ever Kraken Unleashed in a destroyer, but treated as background footage that just might be pretty interesting to watch if you want. Mainly, I thought these are the types of ships that I feel are most affected by the issues brought to the game by carriers that I want to discuss today, so that's why I chose to feature them in this video. Because while all destroyers do rely on being stealthy, a destroyer that focuses almost solely on torpedoes, like these mid-tier Imperial Japanese ones do, have far more of a reliance on remaining undetected while they set up for their attacks. They're honestly kind of similar to how submarines would function, although perhaps that's a topic for another video. The US destroyers at these tiers, on the other hand, the Farragut or Nicholas for example, their primary armament is their guns, which they use to set a lot of fires, firing over islands where they can't be hit in return, that sort of thing. Now, their torpedoes are still a big part of their effectiveness, but out of the 2 weapon systems, well, you fire your guns far more often in a Nicholas than you do in a Mutsuki, is basically what I'm getting at. In fact, the US destroyers at this tier can't even stealth torpedo without smoke, unless the target is coming right for you. So this leads us into what I think the main problem is with carriers, and it's not the damage that they do, at least not directly. That's really not going to be higher on average, note the word average, than what a cruiser or battleship's average is going to be at that tier, at least in my experience. The 2 main issues with carriers, in my opinion, well, one isn't even really an issue if you can balance the ships based on this factor, which is that you can engage carriers while he can engage you. The fact that a bunch of squadrons are engaging you, sure, the aircraft themselves are vulnerable to your AA fire, but the carrier itself is sitting completely safe 25 miles away. Now, I know somebody's going to bring up that, well, a carrier might be safe, but if you keep killing his aircraft, he's not going to be able to recycle them and field them against you again, and blah blah blah. And this is true, the quicker a carrier player loses his aircraft, the less he's going to be able to accomplish in the game, but the simple fact of the matter is that the onslaught from those aircraft is theoretically endless unless the carrier itself is sunk. And it's not generally able to be sunk until quite late in the game. Often they're the last ships alive on the losing team. They just have no need to put their ships in harm's way in the same way that other ship classes do. Chances are that unless you're in a damn Yamato, if you can fire at somebody, chances are that someone can fire back at you. Carriers, on the other hand, can attack you while not presenting you any opportunity to attack them back. It's the warship equivalent of holding someone back at arm's length when you have longer arms than them. They just can't hit you. But that's just a factor of carrier gameplay. That's what it's always going to be like, and if you balance their capabilities according to that, which you can very easily do, that's not the main issue. The main issue that I believe carriers create is the damage they do indirectly by spotting targets that, well, didn't want to be spotted, that need to remain stealthy. If spotting damage was a thing in World of Warships, it worked the same way as it does in World of Tanks, where if you're the one to spot a target and that target is then damaged by friendly players, then half of that damage dealt to them is accredited to you as spotting damage, not at the expense of the player dealing the damage though, mind you. If they deal 200 damage, they get credited 200 damage, and you get 100 spotting damage on top of that. If the same system existed in World of Warships, then I think all of a sudden, every player in the game would be calling carriers overpowered, because including that spotting damage, they'd easily be achieving 500,000 damage regularly at tier 8, let alone 10. Because of the lack of a spotting damage or indirect damage parameter, it's not so obvious just how much indirect damage carriers are inflicting, but go ahead and play a torpedo-focused destroyer in a game with 2 or even 3 carriers, and all of a sudden you'll realise, if you haven't already, just how damaging this factor of carriers is, despite carrier players themselves not really realising how much damage they are indirectly inflicting upon a team, because they don't get credited for it. What'll happen is you'll be sneaking up on a target, be it a cruiser or battleship, staying out of surface detection range, making sure they don't know you're there until the last possible second. You'll have the perfect opportunity, be using all the right tactics, but all of a sudden you're spotted from the air, revealed to the enemy ships only, say, 6.5 kilometers away, and you immediately send your torpedoes out at the target and attempt to retreat, but 15 high explosive shells immediately slam into your ship from 3 different directions. Now you're either dead or reduced to minimal health, and your torpedo salvo is practically useless because the enemy captain has been made aware that you're there, and any half-decent player will be capable of anticipating that there'll be torpedoes coming for them. I mean, if a destroyer pops up almost broadside onto you from that close a range, what do you think he was doing? And the enemy ship will swing either towards or away from you, causing most, if not all, of those torpedoes to sail harmlessly by. Not even because the carrier damaged you, just because he spotted you, you almost died and were not able to do any damage in return. Now, perhaps you think there should be a spotting damage mechanic in World of Warships. That might be an interesting discussion, and I'm honestly surprised that there isn't one, but the main point is that a carrier's aircraft will completely ruin your otherwise perfect stealth, with basically nothing you can do about it. I mean, cruisers also find it important to not be detected at the wrong times, and even destroyers will find it very hard to escape from the heading of incoming aircraft and prevent being spotted, so a cruiser definitely can't. The aircraft squadrons don't usually travel in super predictable lines, and even if they did, it's very easy for a carrier player heading for another target to simply divert a squadron slightly towards roughly where they expect a destroyer to be. I mean, there are very standard destroyer hangouts, and a half-decent carrier player, yes they do exist, will easily learn where those are. Even if they don't, with aircraft moving so quickly and able to change course so easily, it's very difficult to intentionally avoid them and keep avoiding them, especially if there's more than one carrier on the enemy team, meaning there are going to be multiple squadrons in the air at any one time. Now, I'm going to be honest, having gotten used to the gameplay of carriers since the rework last year, I think the old gameplay was better. Perhaps what should have happened was that the old gameplay should have been kept for the most part, but you took control of the aircraft squadron only for the strike run itself, because that meant you were actually playing as an aircraft carrier, whereas these days you're just playing as an aircraft, or squadron of aircraft, and occasionally you have to shift the runway around a little. Still, I doubt Wargaming is going to revert carriers to the way they used to be, so let's go over what I believe is a perfect quote-unquote fix for current carrier gameplay. The idea is that we alter the way in which carriers spot enemy ships. Now, what I was originally going to suggest was that instead of ships having a detection range by air, which they have now, they'd have different detection ranges for the different types of aircraft. For example, their detection range by torpedo bombers would be equal to what it is now, but their detection range by dive bombers for each ship would be slightly less, and their detection range by fighters would be even less again, so little that fighters couldn't effectively spot their own targets. By the time they get close enough to spot even a cruiser with decent concealment, they'd already be too close to launch their rockets, unless they're coming at the cruiser from the side or rear. Of course, they could easily target battleships and cruisers with poor concealment before being too close. Now, I think this does work, but one issue that was mentioned is that it's somewhat unrealistic that surface ships would basically have to do the spotting for the aircraft, where, realistically, wouldn't it be the other way around? I mean, one of the primary roles of carrier-borne aircraft is providing intelligence, locations of enemy ships, but I think not only is gameplay the focus over realism, couldn't you just argue that different aircraft types are flying at different altitudes? I mean, this is realistic. Torpedo bombers are going to be flying much lower than fighters, so cloud cover and simple distance would reduce the fighter's ability to pick out targets. But the gameplay issue that was brought up to counter this suggestion was that stealth AA traps would be a problem. Now, Wargaming has said they don't want any ship types, bar destroyers, to have a higher range on their anti-aircraft guns than they have detectability by air, and what cruisers could do with my suggestion being implemented is basically switch off their anti-aircraft guns, wait for an aircraft squadron to get close enough to almost spot them, so within their air defense range, and then switch them on, effectively ambushing the squadron who wouldn't be able to escape. I have three major counters to this argument though. Number one, that sounds like a relatively tactical use of your ship to me, something that should be encouraged rather than prevented. I mean, it requires concentration, timing, basically a bit of skill. Number two, really only fighters would be vulnerable to this. I mean, bombers have to get basically directly above you anyway, and torpedo bombers retain their current spotting ability, so you can't stealth AA a torpedo bomber squadron in anything but a destroyer, just the same as you can now. And fighters are at least the fastest aircraft type, able to get out of that circle. Reason number three, isn't this basically exactly what carriers currently do to destroyers? I mean, I mentioned that earlier in this video. They'll reveal your location and get you shot at, with nothing you can do about it, far too late for you to get away. You're basically forced to quickly slow down and pop smoke in order to prevent being detected and subsequently deleted, which does alert the enemy ships to the fact that you're there, as well as letting the carrier know that you're there. I mean, all that player is going to need to do is prevent you leaving the smokescreen until surface ships are close enough to spot you behind it, or just come back 60 seconds later and you're going to get spotted, and you're going to get shot at. With the recent rework to AA, that means that anti-aircraft guns will now focus down one aircraft at a time rather than damaging the squadron as a whole. Even if you find yourself in a stealth AA trap, quote unquote, you will be able to turn tail and run and get most of your aircraft out alive, rather than finding your entire squadron is now effectively useless, because while it's still almost full, no individual aircraft has the HP to survive going anywhere near a cruiser or battleship. Possibly, and this is something I brought up when coming up with the solution, but what if your anti-aircraft guns were switched on gradually in order of their range, so you'd immediately be spotted from the maximum range of your AA as soon as you turn them on, but only your close range AA would turn on straight away. Your medium range AA would take a second to warm up, and your long range AA would take a couple more seconds. That completely prevents the idea of stealth AA traps, so let me know what you think of that in the comments below. But I personally don't see this idea of stealth AA traps being much of an issue. I think timing the use of your AA like that is a smart tactic, and I don't think it ruins gameplay or that it's too unrealistic. Obviously, the second any ship opens up on your squadron with AA fire, you'll be able to spot them, regardless of if you're still 6 kilometers away from them in a fighter. But if you're in the camp where you don't think this system would work, then here's an alternative, which was suggested to me by a viewer named Smoking Puffin. What he suggested is keeping the universal air detection range for all aircraft types, but only having carriers spot to the minimap. What this would mean is that when the squadron flies within the air detection range of a ship, that ship pops into existence for the carrier player, It also pops up on the minimap for the whole team, so anyone paying attention to the minimap will know that an enemy ship is there, but the ship doesn't become visible in the actual game to anybody but the carrier player, meaning that nobody can shoot at it. The surface ships still have to actually acquire the target the same ways they usually would. So the carrier player is still providing the team with the same intelligence. Of course, he's going to start pinging the map furiously to draw attention to the fact that the ship he just found is there, but he doesn't immediately light that ship up, allowing his whole team to open fire, because they still won't actually be able to see the ship itself. They can guess fire, especially if the icon on the minimap is right by an island, say, and the aircraft squadron itself can of course begin attacking, which will help friendly ships guess the enemy's location, along with teammates being able to see the tracers from the ship's anti-aircraft guns. So it works from a mechanical standpoint, and this works really well to balance carriers and make them less annoying for other ship types, because one of the hardest things about fighting against a carrier is knowing that you can't counter the carrier itself. That's what people don't like about them. They're invulnerable. You can't fire back at it. Like I said, it's the equivalent of holding someone out at arm's reach and them not being able to do anything about it. It attacks you on another level. It's different to being engaged by another surface ship, so it's providing intel on another level, that being only lighting you up on the minimap, is a good counter to this. Nay, the perfect counter to this. It'll be a bit like when an enemy or even a friendly ship is spotted on the map, but so far away from you that you can't actually see them. They're on the minimap for you to know where they are, but you can't see them at all. Even if they're friendlies, you can't even see their player tag. I'll be honest, I love this idea. The only issue I see with it is that it would still heavily hinder torpedo boat destroyers, because enemies you're attempting to stealth torp will know you're there and make steps to dodge your torpedoes if they're paying any attention to the minimap, but often players aren't. This then makes it seem like the carriers aren't doing anything to scout for you because you can't see what they're seeing. They aren't helping their own team, just in it for their own gain. At least that's what it would seem like. But I think if this mechanic were introduced of spotting only to the minimap, there would be more players using the minimap for intelligence in order to make use of the CV scouting, and more players paying attention to the minimap is always a good thing. The other thing is that it doesn't fix the idea of spot locking, which I brought up in my last video on carriers some weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, there'll be a link on screen and in the description, but I defined the term spot locking as being able to prevent you escaping being spotted. I got the idea for this term, which you lads can help me coin and shoehorn into World of Warships conversation, please go ahead, but I got the idea for the term from the one used in Monster Hunter games called headlocking. Headlocking being when you use a hammer, constantly hit the monster's head, stun him so he's dazed and can't attack you, can't move away, and by the time he recovers from being dazed, you've done enough damage to his head in order to just stun him again, and again, and again. Headlocking. Spot locking is when you're spotted by a carrier's aircraft, they return them to the ship by pressing F, and then immediately launch another squadron and send them straight back to your location. Even in a destroyer, that player can get their next squadron to your location so quickly that you will not be able to move far enough away to avoid being spotted again. You'll just keep getting respotted, the carrier will recall his aircraft and send more your way, you'll get respotted again, rinse and repeat. You just will not be able to escape. Spot locking. I hope that makes sense to you lads. But even though this idea of spotting to the minimap only doesn't really fix that, it does most definitely lessen its effects, and regardless, I would love to see a mechanic like this implemented. Lads and lasses, please let me know in the comments if you think this idea, and also the other one about changing the detection range against different aircraft types, two potential solutions that would help fix what I think is the main issue with carriers, their ability to ruin stealth. Please let me know what you think of that. With these changes in place, you could even bring back the tier 5, 7 and 9 carriers. There wouldn't be an overabundance of them, although I do think that there should never be allowed to be 3 carriers per team in a match. That's just excessive. But I do think that the main issue carriers bring is not the damage they deal, and I think most people could agree on this. Rather, the two main issues with them are the fact that they are invulnerable while they attack you, and the fact that they get rid of stealthy gameplay, especially when they can have 3 squadrons up in the air at any one time if there's 3 carriers on the team. Well, the new changes have helped us fight back against the aircraft. The carrier itself being safe is just a factor of gameplay, but I think this fix to their spotting is the perfect way of integrating them into the game, And if it were implemented, then they do retain their damage dealing capability. They're still competitive, we don't have to completely shaft them in order to stop pissing other players off. But the main way in which they quote-unquote ruin the game is almost gone. And I don't think it would annoy CV players much in return, because they don't actually get any reward for indirect damage. As it is, they're not losing anything. I think it's perfect, and I would love to know what you lads think about it. If you like this idea, share it around, create some discussion around it, maybe share this video with some people, and hopefully someone at Wargaming or perhaps one of the community contributor YouTubers sees it and spreads the word. Of course, if you hate this idea, then go ahead and call me a bastard in the comments, why not? But either way, that's going to do us for this video. Lads, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and that if you did, you leave a like, subscribe and hit that bell icon, join the 360 squad, and of course once again let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Also, by the way guys, please send me some more replays. Come follow me on Twitter and Twitch, join the Discord and check out Patreon, or hit that join button here on YouTube if you wish to further support my channel. Links are all in the description below. Thank you lads for watching this video, have a lovely good day, and always remember, keep your bagpipes close at hand, keep your kilt firmly on, and I shall see you next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. Captain Thuba, DA261, Gisli Gadarson and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.